And welcome back. Hopefully the audio doesn't cut out on this one, but in the last video we got a water pump removed and our power steering pump removed, as well as our radiator and such. As I promised, I'm bringing you back for the crank pulley removal. As I commented in the last video, we're just using a standard 3-jaw puller that you can see there. And if you look at these arms here on the side, I've flipped them around so that that little hook on the end is actually facing out. And hopefully you can see that in there. I'll show you this a bit better when we get it out. But you can see the hook ends are going through the little oval circles in the pulley. Now the actual factory pulley goes in between where you see kind of the oval or the spaces. Hopefully I can get down there and show you this, but I'll point to one of them here. It actually goes in between here and then grabs some ridges on the back of the pulley. But I found in doing the 6.4 this works well, this looks good as well. And I'll show you this when I get the pulley out because it's easier obviously to see the back of it. But I just broke the crank bolt loose with an impact wrench and then threaded it back in a good 5 to 6 turns and made sure it had plenty of meat back in the crank. And of course you can see here it's just like any other puller. It's going to push against that crank bolt and should start backing this pulley off. So I'm going to work on this, and then like I said, when I get this pulley off of here, provided it comes off okay, then I'll bring you back and show you the back of it and show you how this 3-jaw puller is actually grabbing a hold of this pulley a bit better. With that being said, I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So I had to back the bolt out a bit more to get some more perch on it, because the washer of the bolt will stop you from pulling it off eventually. But you can see we got it a pretty good ways off, a little bit more to go. But while I had the puller off, I wanted to show this to you. So this is just one of these you know, standard 3-jaw pullers you can get at any auto parts store. And you can see what we did with the claws there. We just flipped them so they're the opposite direction. So that way these hooks are going through those little holes, the center holes, those oblong holes you see there, and grabbing from basically, oh, there you go, now you can see it, grabbing through that hole and hooking the edge of it, and then putting pressure against the crankshaft bolt to then push the pulley off. So like I said, I backed that bolt out a few more turns so we can get a bit more perch on it, and we're going to continue to back this off, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. You can see we have our prize, and now that we have the back of the pulley exposed, I can show you a bit better. You can see how those jaws are the width of those jaws is from that 3-jaw puller. Each jaw fits perfectly inside those oblong holes, and you can see with that foot reversed, it'll grab the inside lip of all three, and it is a little bit cumbersome, because what I found is as you're getting this tightened up to hold itself into position, sometimes you have to grab all 3 jaws in one hand like this to keep the legs flared out so they don't fall out of the holes while you're tightening up that center screw, at least until you get enough force on it, it'll hold itself into position, and then you can start cranking on it to back the pulley out. And I had to back this bolt out at least on go through 2 rounds of pulling the pulley off as far as I could until the pulley hit that big washer at the end and stopped. And I would take the 3-jaw puller off, back the bolt out a bit more, do it again, and on the final pass I was probably 3 or 4 threads into the crank, kind of just a little bit closer than I would like it, but I was about 3 or 4 threads in, and it took about another half a turn of the 3-jaw puller, and the pulley fell the rest of the way off. But again, just to show that to you, that's why they're faced outward, so they'll grab through there. Now the factory puller, if you had one, you'll see these raised lips on all three sides of these that are actually in line with these bigger oblong holes, and the factory puller, to my understanding, will reach through and actually grab a hold of these lips and pull it off that way versus the way, you know, we did it. But, you know, again, that requires you to kind of have that tool. So we got our crank pulley off at this point. Obviously, as you can see there, looks like we got a little bit of a leaky seal on here. Some of that came off with the pulley. It looks like some of it may have been dripping, but no biggie. We'll put another crank. We'll put a new crank seal on it before we put the timing cover back in. So what we're going to do next is that we're going to see if we can back these bolts out of this air conditioning compressor, at least the two that go into the timing cover, and just kind of, again, see if we can just let the compressor hang there by the main bolt that supports it on the block. And then once we can get that, then we'll get the rest of the bolts out of the timing cover, to include the 4 that actually go up through the bottom of the oil pan, because you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and actually 5. You have 2 on the sides of the oil pan that go through, and you have 3 more up front, so you have 5 on the bottom that go through the oil pan that need to come out. And you can actually see that we have a missing timing cover bolt right there. I didn't take that one out with the water pump. I double checked. You can kind of see some rust accumulation inside that hole there where it hasn't had a bolt in it in a while. So definitely somebody's been in here meddling, and it looks like they forgot to put a timing cover bolt back in, so we'll have to order a replacement in, provided that we keep this block. But we'll go through, we'll get the rest of these bolt covers off, and just like on our 6.4, to make note of it, there's a little additional support arm that you can see is bolted on the driver's side head that also bolts on the back of our timing cover. And one difference, if you've watched our 6.4 series, you'll notice on the 6.4 there isn't a, or on this one, there isn't a cooling passage that comes through the timing cover, because on the 6.4 there's an EGR cooler that sits underneath the intake that you don't have on a 5.7. So there's minor differences in the timing cover, but my understanding is that these timing covers are pretty universal to the block. In other words, you can take a 5.7 Hemi timing cover and put it on a 6.4 block. If I understand things correctly, they're pretty interchangeable. It allows you to put in a 6.4 liter into a truck that maybe came with a 5.7, but you keep your 5.7 timing cover, put it on the 6.4 block, and that way all of your 5.7 accessories routing stay the same, because remember, all of your accessories bolt to the front timing cover. So it's nice in that aspect that you can have a bigger displacement on the back end, but then keep your alternator and all your accessories exactly the way that they were, so you don't have to worry about rewiring anything to accommodate for changes that are on the actual 6.4 timing cover. So that's kind of a little bit of interesting trivia for you. So like I said, we're going to work on getting those air conditioning air conditioning compressor bolts out, and then we'll work on getting these timing cover bolts out. And when we get it out and get ready to take timing cover off, I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. Yes, we were able to remove the 2 bolts that went through the air conditioning compressor into our timing cover. They're both the same size bolt, but unlike the 6.4, the 6.4, if you remember, had studs and then just had a nut on each end. These are actual bolts. Plenty of clearance on this one versus the 6.4. Plenty of clearance to just unthread them and back them all the way out. So we'll get these bagged and tagged. That reminds me, I forgot to show you this in a couple other videos, but yes, we are employing our favorite bag and tag method, as you can see there, as we get the bolts off, just to, trying to label them, trying to remember where they all go. The timing cover bolts so far make up in this one the little retaining bolt that you saw on the top for the arm that goes into that driver's side cylinder head, which is this little bolt here. It also has what is supposed to be 5 of these. They're all the same length, but the missing one, if you remember, was right here. That's either missing or broke off in the cover. Either way, there's no head on it, but we shall see. So there should be 5 of these, again, all the same length. You do have one kind of oddball bolt, which, as you can see, is the same length, but has a shoulder on it. This shoulder, just like in our 6.4, goes up here on top and threads in to the driver's side cylinder head. So it's got like a little metal spacer in there. Hopefully you can see that. That's why it's got a shoulder on that bolt. And you can see I've got that one marked with an S. So you can see that the timing cover bolts, I've just put like a little green X next to each hole that we've taken a timing cover bolt out of. That way, again, so that way we've got a video record of it now that we can refer back to, because again, the bolts would have come out of this one, this location. If it was here, this one, there's one underneath that little corner right there. You can see it there in the camera. This location, this location, this location, and of course that retaining fastener on top, and of course the 2 bolts out of the air compressor so far is what make up the timing cover bolts. So I'm just kind of looking over things now to see if there's another one that we by chance missed. It doesn't look like one's hidden around a corner anywhere, but I'm going to just gently tap on this cover a little bit with a rubber mallet and see if we can get this cover off. Obviously don't want to use a full-blown hammer or any kind of a metal hammer. Okay, it's got a little bit of a give to it. You can hear it, but it feels like something's still holding it in place. So I might be missing a bolt here or there. I'm gonna have to look things over. I did take the ones out on the bottom of the oil pan. I forgot to mention that earlier. Like I said, there are 5. There's 1 on each side, and you got 3 across the front. But let me do this. Let me continue to work on this timing cover and see if I can find any more hidden bolts that need to come out before this thing will drop, and then I'll bring you back. Hold on a minute. Okay, so hopefully you can hear that. We've got our drip pan back in place. Matter of fact, let me push that back a little bit further. There we go. That's a bit better. Again, nice thing about having those extra long mixing pans as drip pans is that they cover quite a bit of distance. And the timing cover is coming loose. Just took a couple more taps with a rubber mallet to get the top to try to separate, and then it started draining more coolant from there. So I'm just kind of letting this thing drip dry a little bit before we give it a few more whacks again. Rubber mallet, not wanting to cause damage to the timing cover. Let's see. Let's give it a few more taps here. There we go. Now we're getting a little bit somewhere. Yeah, it's coming. It's just stuck on there pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to continue. You can see that starting to separate from the engine block there. I'm going to continue to work on it this way. It's starting to separate. I don't see any more bolts. I think we're in the clear at this point. I think it's just, pretty well stuck in place from being, torqued in that position for who knows how long. Okay, but I'm going to continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. Okay, and welcome back. So yeah, just took a couple of firm whacks on either side here and here with that rubber mallet, but it did. You can see it broke free finally from its slumber, and there we go. Just like on our 6.4, that massive chunk of aluminum is considered your timing cover, aka pretty much the entire front of your motor. I'll place that down there for safekeeping. And there we go. There's the front of our Hemi, ladies and gentlemen. And if you've watched our 6.4 series, this is going to look very eerily familiar. So yeah, pretty much same fuel pump setup, and I'll have to compare it to a new one, but that timing chain tensioner looks a little far out for my taste, so the timing chain may be stretched a bit on this, which would be normal given its age. The other thing is, you see this one, you see how this is all plastic? If you've watched Scott Rod's channel, if not, there's a link to his channel in the description, and I'll put a link to his channel at the end of it. That plastic guide is actually an older revision. That guide on his Hemi broke and caused him, you know, a bunch of bent valves and things of that nature. So that tells me this has probably never had a timing chain or accessories replaced on it, because they don't make this out of plastic anymore. This is actually a metal piece that has a piece of nylon, if I remember, like a heavy duty plastic or type of nylon that the chain rests in order, because this does have a habit of breaking on some setups. So yeah, that's an older setup. I would say, judging by that and how far out that tensioner is, it looks like this is, again, more than likely got the original setup on it. So yeah, that's it as far as what's holding your timing cover on. I don't want to say that's it as to, you know, undersell it, but you've got 5 bolts on the front oil pan that come up through the bottom. You can see them there, 1 on each side, 3 on front that have got to come out. You should have 5 of these bolts, as we covered earlier. You'll have this short stubby bolt, which again goes through this reinforcement piece on your driver's side cylinder head. And you'll have the 1 bolt that's the same length as the others, but has that shoulder on it that, if you remember, threads through the cover and ends up here in your driver's side cylinder head. But other than it being an older setup and having an older timing chain guide on it, it looks pretty good and pretty clean in here. So I'm actually very happy to see that, and I have to look for it. But you see how there's a timing cover dowel pin right here? There should be another dowel pin right here, which sometimes they end up on the timing cover. I'll have to check and make sure it ended up there and didn't end up on the bottom of the oil pan. Although we'll have to drop the oil pan anyway to inspect the screen, clean it, and put a new oil pan gasket on it. But yeah, it's not unsurprising. I figured we were going to have to order new timing components and get those older plastic ones upgraded to where they should be. But other than that, I think I'll cut the video at this one and just kind of keep it short. But we covered taking the crank pulley off, and we covered dropping this timing cover, and so far so good. I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm not seeing any other hardware issues, anything exploded, anything out of the ordinary. You know, there's coolant and coolant passages where coolant should be. There's oil where there's oil should be. And hopefully when we get the heads off, which will be the next thing that we tackle, that everything continues to look clean, and we can just do an upper engine rebuild on it and consider it done. We did get in, we had it on back order. We were going to use it for another project, but we did get in a Hellcat oil pump. So just like we did with the black truck that we worked on, we'll put a Hellcat oil pump on here instead of the factory 5.7, just because the Hellcat oil pump not only gives us more volume of oil, but a higher oil pressure, so to help protect all the new parts that we're getting ready to put in it. But other than that, I'll let you go and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.